This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Authority 480 Herbicide from FMC. Authority 480 Herbicide provides extended activity on the toughest weeds like kochia, wild buckwheat, cleavers, Russian thistle, and many more. See your local retailer today for more information.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And of course, also, hello to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. It is Agronomic Monday here today, so Peter W. P. Johnson, fresh off of holidays. Yes, he went to a sunny climate, back with probably a sunburn and all, and he's ready to talk agronomy here again today on the program, so looking forward to having Pete back. We're also going to do a product spotlight with Nufarm, longtime supporters of this program, really appreciate Nufarm, I should say, for always being involved with RealAg Radio. We're going to hear today from Tyler Gullen, who's going to talk about dealing with some of that resistant kochia. Yes. Hate that stuff. And we'll also have some time today for the top ag news stories of the day. If you have any feedback on today's program, we'd love to hear from you on any of the topics we discuss or anything else that is top of mind. I've heard from a few of you over the weekend when it comes to some of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index data, which has been really, really great. Do appreciate that. Lots of ways to get a hold of me. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. Or, of course, you can always call that RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. Got an email from Corey who pointed out that on Friday's show, I had mentioned in the intro that we were going to hear about Jeff in this new sports bar. So Jeff Nielsen was a guest from Farmer from Olds on the Friday RealAg Issues panel, and Jeff alluded to the fact he owns a bar now, but then we never got into it. Yes, he opened and I can't remember the name of it, but it's in Olds, and it's like it's centered around golf. It's like a sports bar, and they've got golf simulators and really, really cool stuff. And yeah, very, very neat. I'm sure if I know Jeff, tons of beers on tap. So next time in Olds, I'm going to stop in there. Looking forward to that. So yes, we did not get into that. We didn't have time for it, but Corey did point that out. I have heard from a few of you as well. I heard from John, who sent a note and said, listened to the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index wrap from Wednesday and Friday. One word, ouch. Yeah. That's one way to put it. And what John's alluding to there is the fact that farmers are pretty negative right now about the current environment and how they feel about the 2024 season. And I don't care if it's livestock producers or people that are involved in broadacre crop production, just negative across the board. Now, remember, beef producers feeling better about the marketing opportunity in front of them. That was very, very clear, very positive on the direction of the markets. But, yeah, margins, not so much. They're all still, we need some sustained, I think, good weather for the beef producer to feel a bit more confident in what they see in front of them. Hope, listen, I not hope you watched the Super Bowl. I'm sure most of you did. I haven't seen the ratings yet, but I believe the 2023 Super Bowl was one of the highest watched ever. It was like 115 million people in the U.S., not the global number, but in the U.S. I have a bet, I think this is kind of the popular bet, that we crushed records yesterday. When my daughter is texting me, how can she watch the Super Bowl? You know we have crossed the precipice of a lot of people watching the game that necessarily don't. It was interesting. My wife and I went to a sports bar to watch it. And, lots of people. This place is packed. And one of the things that I noticed right away is obviously this is, an event that this is what everybody's doing, is watching the game. And some people there for the football, some people there for the halftime show. A lot of mixed opinions on that. And some people there for the commercials, some people there just for the food. But some people there, more and more, increasingly, people there for the gambling. Yes, it was interesting. When Reba was singing the national anthem, it was funny listening to people yelling, "Speed up, slow down." People had the over-under on how long it would take her to sing the anthem. People cheering the coin toss as if there had been a touchdown. So you could really, really see how the prop betting is a massive, massive part of the entertainment of a game like we saw there yesterday. Great game. It was close, fantastic. You could just feel, though, you could just feel that. I said to my wife as we were watching it, like, the Chiefs are going to win. She's like, "What do you mean? They're down by 3. They're going to win." It felt like writing was all over it. Boy, that extra point miss by San Francisco hurt immensely. There was just points in that game that just really, really stood out. Fantastic Super Bowl, though. Like, no complaints whatsoever. I thought it was a great game. Like I said on Friday, I was cheering for the 49ers. I wanted Christian McCaffrey and Kyle Shanahan to win. Brock Purdy, the story. And like on the radio this morning on Sports Talk, people are hammering Brock Purdy. Oh, he didn't come through. He played fantastic. I don't know what people just want to, like, tear people down. Honestly, I thought he played really well. So probably wishing, I don't know why San Francisco took the ball in overtime. I thought Tony Romo on the broadcast really sort of tried to make excuses for that. You don't take the ball first. You take the ball second, because then you know you can go for it on fourth down, what you need to do. I thought that was really kind of strange. So, there's some unforced errors and some errors that they probably wish, decision-making both ways. Travis Kelce almost bowling over Andy Reid. That was a weird moment. It was a really good game, so I hope everybody enjoyed it. And I know probably a lot of people listening in the Midwest felt pretty happy the fact that Kansas City Chiefs, back-to-back, going for the three-peat. We'll see if they can do it. My Bears, a long way from any sort of, never mind making the championship, but just trying to make the playoffs. Okay, we're going to take a break, end the sports talk, get into the agronomy, and we'll do that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, of course, on Rural Radio 147. We're joined right now by Philip Korzak. He's the Director of Sales for Western Canada for Vaderstad, based out of Saskatchewan. If somebody's never had a seed hawk in the field before, why would you look at purchasing one?
Really, one of the keys that has been to our success that lasted so long is our dual knife seed and fertilizer system. We do believe that we are the most accurate seeding tool in the market for seed placement. And the key component, not only with that seed placement, is also the fertilizer location. But we really feel that the dual knife system with the separation horizontally and vertically is really what's going to ultimately give that crop, especially a small seeded crop and high value crop like canola, easy access to those nutrients very early on and quick emergence. But equally important with that quick emergence is the even emergence.
If somebody wants more information on Vaderstad, how do they find it, Philip?
You know what? You can go to our website. It's very simple. It's just www.vaderstad.com.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Let's get started with Agronomic Monday, but first, Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. Co-op, here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more by going to Co-op's website, co-op.crs/farm. That is Co-op. Okay, let's bring him in. It is Peter Pete Johnson. Pete, after a week off, you're back. It's great to chat with you again.
Yeah, absolutely, Shaun. And every once in a while, you need a break. So we took a break. It was excellent. I don't know, but I missed being on Agronomy Monday. I got to be honest. I love being on Agronomy Monday. We just have some fun, and we generally talk about good stuff. So the break was good, but I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, I like how you sent me like a sad emoji that you you weren't on the show. It's like,
yep.
Pete, you're on holidays. It's okay. We will. The show has to go on. It will go on, but we do miss you. Okay. Now, after a week off, I'm sure you are feeling more than fresh. Where are you headed to this week? What are you up to?
Man, it is a busy week. So I start the week. I'm in right now in Nova Scotia. I'm speaking in Nova Scotia 5 times, actually over 2 days.
Oh.
And so that's a bunch of fun. And then I come back on Wednesday to do the word, and I have some meetings on Thursday with clients, and then I get to go to Prince Edward County on Friday and speak to the Prince Edward County Soil and Crop at their annual meeting. So she's a whirlwind tour, man. Nice.
It is that time of the year. There is no doubt about it, but this is where so this is fun. If it was 12 months of this pace, then that would be maybe a different sort of story. But this is the time where it's great to get out and connect with the audience and share ideas. You learn a lot from the audience as well. So I'm looking forward this week to being in Louisville, Kentucky for the National Farm Machinery Show. And then at the back end of the week, being in Red Deer, Alberta with Cargill Market Sense and a big customer event that they're having in Red Deer. So kind of the zipping around for sure. Okay, let's talk about yield. Now, I like this topic because when we talk about the components of yield, I think this is kind of fascinating because it's talking about the things that drive yield. And I think it was a couple months ago, you and I talked about or maybe it was a month ago, some of the things that make up yield. But what we want to talk about today are like some of those things like plants per heads per square foot, components like that really fall in line with the process of finding a higher yield outcome. What have you learned through the Yen project this past year?
Well, Shaun, it's not just the Yen, and the Yen is awesome. And actually, there's going to be out very shortly, if not today, tomorrow, I think, our first wheat school, RealAg Wheat School of 2024, and I interviewed Dennis Pennington from Michigan State. He's their wheat extension specialist, and of course, he's heavily involved with the Yen. But the Yen is the Yield Enhancement Network, if anyone doesn't know what that acronym means. But what really intrigues me is I've been in extension for way too long, right, Shaun? I've been part of this game of learn new stuff, try to get the farmers to learn about it or hear about it and let them try it and find out if it actually works. But along that journey, we haven't always broken it down as scientifically as getting right down to did we get more yield because the kernels were heavier? Did we get more yield because we have more pods on the plant or because the soybeans were bigger? And the last couple of years, that has shifted, and the growers' understanding, at least for a lot of growers, they're now looking at yield components. So yeah, I got a higher yield, but did that come from more kernels on the cob of corn or more heads per meter squared in the wheat crop? Or like, where did that yield come from? What of the yield components really drives yield? Because if I know the component that makes the biggest difference, then maybe I can tailor my management to increase that particular component because I know that's the one that makes the biggest difference. And it's been a really great learning experience. It's been a fun ride with, you mentioned the wheat yen, the Great Lakes wheat yen. When you look at the data, it's all about heads per unit area, per square yard in the U.S., per square meter in Canada. And that's the driver that makes the most difference. That when you look at the high yield growers and the low yield growers, the high yield growers have almost 3 heads for every 2 heads in that per unit area that that the low yield growers do. So like a 50% increase in the number of heads, or close to it, at least a 36, 38% increase in the number of heads. If you look at all the other yield parameters, yeah, so maybe they have a little bit heavier kernels, but 5% at most. The size of the head is not different at all. They're exactly the same size. And so you kind of step back from that and say, okay, I want to be a high yield grower. The low hanging fruit in being a high yield grower in wheat is heads per unit area. When we look at corn, I mean, you still need kernels, you need plants, but the biggest increase lately has been in 1,000 kernel weight, making those kernels bigger. So that's different than wheat, where it's more heads. In corn, we actually want to try to drive everything, of course, across all crops, but the big one is in kernel weight. In soybeans, it's the number of pods per plant. So by breaking this down into the yield components and actually measuring each yield component when we do the yield analysis, it's really, I think, moved the bar in terms of where do we focus in every crop, and that's just cool.
So how does that ideal number of heads change in the, so there's the, you said high yield versus low yield growers, but what about yield potential of the field, right? And how does it change from high yield zone or geography? How does that change? How does that number change if you're in a low yield geography?
So what's really interesting, and I mean, every year is a bit different, but when you look at 2022 data, the yield potential between the high yield growers and low yield growers was almost the same. The yield potential, because we actually do that calculation, the yield potential on the high yield growers was 198 bushels per acre. On the low yield growers, it was 193 bushels per acre. And so the high yield growers just got a way bigger percent of their yield potential than the low yield growers did. And when you say, how does that change in terms of heads per meter squared per unit area? Well, that was the big difference that drove the yield. And if the low yield growers could have gotten more heads per meter squared, they probably, we don't have the side-by-side plots to know this for sure, but it looks like they would have been a higher yield grower. And so those lower yield growers need to figure out how to get more heads per meter squared, because that's what's driving them. And what is that magic number? If you're asking me, okay, Pete, what's the magic number? Is it 1,000 heads per square meter? Is it 100 heads per square meter? Yeah, it's going to be different, but we really do want big numbers. We always used to say that kind of if we hit 800 heads per square yard or per square meter, that was a big number. We have growers over 1,000. And I mean, we also have some growers with high head numbers where if they didn't manage it well, so there's still a whole bunch of other agronomy that you can't let go. And if you totally run out of water because you're in Lethbridge, Alberta, and it hasn't rained or snowed for 3 years, I think that number drops. But if you look at the work, man, I'm astounded at, you have to have enough heads there or you just never get the yield.
You're in a more risky situation, though, if I have the same amount of heads in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, as you do in Lucan, Ontario, and I don't get the rain that I need, are I not putting myself in a higher risk position? Like, am I being too aggressive from an agronomic perspective if I'm trying to meet that same number?
So that's always been the thinking, Shaun. But if we're talking spring wheat, and spring wheat and winter wheat are a little different in this. So okay. I'm in Lucan, that's winter wheat. Swift Current is spring. But if you look at Brian Barris's work out of Lethbridge, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, Lethbridge, he would say even in dry climates, if you don't keep that head count at least at a reasonable level, that you give up yield. And that was really surprising data to me. And I mean, the other thing I would say, Shaun, is it depends if you have a whole bunch, you plant a really high seeding rate. And so now every plant competes with every plant. And, we talk about this with 5-inch row wheat versus 7.5-inch row wheat. here in the Great Lakes Basin and trying to get those wheat seeds far enough apart so that they don't compete with one another. But if I go to a really high seeding rate, now I got a whole bunch of plants that are trying to survive. If I can go to a bit lower seeding rate and let those plants tiller more, then if it gets dry, they'll drop tillers. Whereas if each head is an individual plant, they all want to survive. They all want to generate seed. And so then I think you use up that moisture too quickly. But you got to have enough plants, and they've got to tiller enough to give you that high head count. And that's always the challenge is can we make sure though the spring wheat is going to tiller? And spring wheat typically doesn't tiller the way that winter wheat does or the way that barley does. So it's a bit more of a challenge. But no, at the end of the day, you got to have enough heads.
Very fascinating. FP Genetics, innovative seed genetics for Canadian farmers. Contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your certified seed strategy specific to your region. Find out more by going to fpgenetics.ca. We'll be right back here on Agronomic Monday on RealAg Radio. Shaun Haney, Peter Repeat Johnson, right after this.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm. Joining me on the line is Barry Mann. He's the Vice President of Investor Relations for Genesis Fertilizers, and we're talking about an exciting project.
So the project is essentially bringing farmers together to create a vertically integrated fertilizer company based on the prairies, and it's to give farmers the opportunity to take advantage of the abundant supply that we have of natural gas, create our own nitrogen fertilizer from that, and deliver it direct to the farm.
Investing in this project, a farmer that does, they're still going to pay market price for the product, but they're going to see a benefit in the payback after.
Yeah, I think you've pretty well summarized it. With the vertical integration, we're not out to bust the market. It's going to join the market. So yeah, we'll be selling it at market price, but because the farmers are the owners, because they're the shareholders, they just also are going to happen to be the customer. Based on the amount of fertilizer that they use on their farm, the average farmer is taking an ownership stake in the project based on those tons, so that at the end of the day, those profits come back to the farm.
If you're not too busy this week, something that I think you should check out is the Sask Soil Health Conference. It's happening February 13th and 14th. That's actually starting tomorrow at Prairieland Park in Saskatoon. So if you're in the area, make sure you check it out. You're going to learn from knowledgeable speakers, take in a producer panel, and network with your peers in this informative 2-day event. Learn more by going to sasksoil.ca/soil health conference. That's going to be a great one. Lots of attention right now on soil health. We are joined here on Agronomic Monday by Peter Wheatpeat Johnson. Pete, I wanted to discuss with you a presentation that you recently heard from a researcher out of Ohio State, and talking about learning blocks. Okay. Now, first of all, let's, for the person that is kind of out of the loop here, what exactly is a learning block? I need to know before we get deeper into this.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, Shaun, because if you don't understand the terminology, you're sort of cooked before you begin. But I will say, you mentioned the Saskatchewan Soil Health Conference, but one of the things that always astounds me is how much I learn. Like I've been in this game a long time, and people think I know, something. But for example, this yield monitor and the learning blocks and what I'm going to discuss here now, this is all new information. And how is it that I didn't know this before? So for goodness sakes, there's so many great events out there. Get out and continue your education. We have such an opportunity here in Canada that a lot of the world doesn't get. You just got to take that opportunity and use it to your full advantage. So a learning block. So once we've gone to precision agriculture, the floodgates of opportunities simply have been thrown wide open. And we get yield zones. And we can talk lots about how we get to yield zones, but once the grower has determined that area of the field is a low yield zone, this is a mid yield zone, that's a high yield zone. Well, now I go to my computer, I write a script, and I say, okay, so in my low yield zone, should I plant more seed or less seed, or should I put more fertilizer on, less fertilizer on? And so you basically program your planter that as you drive down that field, and this has always been the criticism of field length strips. Well, yeah, Peter, over the whole length of the strip, that plant population, increased plant population, it didn't make me any money, but I think in the high yield zone, I need more plants, and in the low yield zone, I need less plants. And so I want to look at it in those respective zones. And so these learning blocks are, I drive through the field with my planter, I go through the low yield zone, my planter, because of the script that I wrote, puts in 100 feet of low population, and in the high yield zone, it puts in 100 feet of high population. And then when I combine that, I pull that data out of that block with my yield monitor, and I say, there's the answer. So that's what a learning block is. The problem is that they don't work.
Okay, so why? Because it sounds that sounds like it. That seems pretty simple enough. What is? It was Elizabeth Hawkins, right? That was the researcher.
Absolutely. So Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins from the Ohio State University. We had her at the Ag Conference, and at the Ag Conference, she actually just mentioned that data. And I watched her session, and I thought, wow, that towards the end of her presentation, she made a comment about that. And it's always bothered me, Shaun. If I have a 40-foot wide header, and I cross the line where I go into that zone of low population in my learning block, well, the outside of the header is still feeding the high population wheat or soybeans or whatever back into the combine. And it can take as much as 20 seconds in some of these big combines for the crop that goes from the outside of that header to come into the center of the header and get fed through. And now it's blended with the center of the header that's in the low population zone already. And so what does that yield data mean? And what Dr. Hawkins found, what Elizabeth found, is that if your learning block is not a minimum of 250 feet long, that it means nothing, because there's so much bleed from the edges and the center and the blending that happens through the combine that it means absolutely nothing. And so that's a minimum is 250 feet. The wider the header, the longer that needs to be. So we get to, a 16-row header, a 40-foot wide header probably needs 400 feet or at least 300 feet long in that learning block. And then you actually have to take out the edges of the learning block where the bleed happens, and you have to look at just the center portion to get that yield data. And that assumes that you've calibrated the stupid yield monitor. And she also said, which blew my brains, because some companies now tout that they have a self-calibrating yield monitor. And Elizabeth's comment was, well, Peter, if the grower never calibrates their yield monitor at all, self-calibration monitors are an improvement. But if the grower calibrates the yield monitor themselves, they should keep doing that, because the self-calibrating ones just don't self-calibrate very well. And you just go, oh my gosh, that is really powerful information. And if we're going to make management decisions based on these learning blocks, and I think it's a cool concept, but it's got to be accurate data. And I think there's a whole lot of inaccurate data that we're using out there to make those recommendations, and that's a big worry too.
So just to go back here, what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to do field length spots. Is that what you're saying?
So, the beauty of this is that if we go back to field length strips, and I mean, that's what I cut my teeth on. now I've got a problem because I have a field like strip and I only get the yield data on the whole strip. So was it different in the high yield zone versus the low yield zone? I can't really pull that out as well. Well, actually I can, because now if I get some bleed, the bleed is still in the high population strip compared to the low population strip. And so it's the cutoff isn't as maybe clean as I'd like it, but at least I'm getting that yield data. And what Caleb Niemeyer from the University of Guelph, he's working on his PhD right now, and he's actually working more on management zones. But what he's discovered is that if I run the field length strip, he's writing software that he can take that field length strip and pull out how long does that learning block need to be when it's in the same treatment, and how many replications can I get in that strip compared to the strip beside it, which goes through the same high yield and low yield zones, and can I pull that data out statistically with the field length strips so that the bleed problem and the edge problem is not as significant. It still exists, but it's not as significant, and I can actually get a much better answer. And he's pretty convinced that he can get there. And he says when he gets that software written, it's going to be open access, free to anybody. He's really keen to move the bar forward on this concept and on precision farming. And so I think like that's awesome, because it used to be I did a field like strip. That's one replication, one site, one replication. It has a 52% chance of being correct. I can flip a coin and do about as well. But if I can take that same data and actually like scientifically pull out what's real and what's not, then that's way more powerful data. I'm still going to want more than one strip in the field. Like regardless, I'm a replication guy, but this is, I think, moves the bar a long way on using yield monitors to get valid data. You still got to calibrate them, and you still have to make sure that you validate, but just cool stuff.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, one of the common questions that I have been getting, not questions for me to answer, questions for me to pass on to you from the audience across a pretty wide geography is my wheat okay? And we've seen a pretty significant fluctuation in some of the weather patterns in states like, say, Montana. Of course, Western Canada has experienced that temperature. Pretty warm. Boy, this is really nice out here. There's no snow, and then boom, we went through that very significant cold snap. Some of that area did not have snow prior to the cold snap. There is snow covering some of that ground today, which snow after the fact isn't going to help you, and it'll protect for the next cold snap. But is my wheat okay? Go through the agronomic rules here, Pete.
So I think it's not just wheat that we need to talk about, Shaun. It's alfalfa, it's winter barley, it's winter rye.
Yeah.
Right? It's all of those crops that are still alive. And actually here in Great Lakes Basin, some of the fruit tree growers are getting very concerned because the buds are breaking on fruit trees. And so they're not really susceptible yet, but because they're advanced, if they get to bloom early and we get that frost at bloom time. So there's like this weather pattern is not ideal for any winter annual or perennial crop. Absolutely. So what really it comes down to is if you have no snow and it goes cold, the question becomes, how cold does it get? Because the lethal temperature for every crop is a little bit different. For winter canola, if I recall correctly, it's about minus 18 or minus 19 Celsius. And once it breaks dormancy, it's less than that. Winter canola, the crown is above the ground. So, we're pretty worried about minus 15 even without snow cover at this point. We hope it's okay, but how much did it break dormancy? With winter wheat, typically we would say minus 21 Celsius is where we start to get really concerned if it's broken dormancy and fully broken dormancy. And man, we had soil temperatures in Ontario of about 5 degrees Celsius for at least 2 days. You get 5 degrees Celsius for 3 days. It really starts to break dormancy. It hasn't fully broken. We need probably 9 to break it fully, but it's a worry. So you break dormancy, it's -9 Celsius. So it really becomes, how long was it warm? Where's the growing point? Is it like wheat? It's in the soil an inch deep. So then that soil temperature is what matters, not the air temperature. Is it alfalfa or canola where the crown is right at ground level? So now air temperature becomes the driver. And then did it break dormancy? How much does that affect its ability to withstand cold temperatures? And then how cold did it get? And with alfalfa, if it gets to -15, we're in trouble. And in fact, if it breaks dormancy, then sometimes as little as -4, -5 may be a concern.
Rye, I don't think anything kills rye, does it?
Oh, even rye has a lethal temperature, man. But it is tough. Rye is a tough crop. There's no question about that.
So don't judge it all by the color. Like if it goes yellow or it's black, like just that's not the indicator. Oh, I think my wheat's toast, right? That's not what we do.
So Shaun, I drove past my own wheat crop on Friday, and it is like I drove past it, and you couldn't tell there was wheat there. It has gone so purple and brown that it just looks like the soil. And I was going like, what? But it's 100% fine. It's gone that color because of the weather conditions, but the growing point down that inch in the soil is perfect. If you're in Montana and the wheat is all yellow, well, the above ground part of the plant just doesn't matter. It's yellow because of wind burn. It's yellow because of maybe cold temperatures. But if that 1 inch in the soil didn't get to that lethal temperature, and likely, hopefully, the Montana wheat hasn't broken dormancy yet, so we're talking -21 Celsius. That's cold. If you haven't got there, hopefully, probably the wheat is fine.
Pete, all the best in your travels. You're right now in the snowiest part, I think, of North America. So hopefully you don't get socked in there this week. I haven't looked at the forecast, but boy, did Nova Scotia get a lot of snow last week. Have yourself a great one, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, you as well, Shaun. Thanks for having me. I love doing it. And next week it is.
You're listening to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday, and we'll be right back right after this.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
Whether you're a rookie soybean grower or a seasoned vet, the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com has exactly what you need to stay in the game. The latest research and the best agronomic advice from industry experts, along with local and global market coverage on demand, anywhere, anytime. Make this growing season your best growing season with the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am Lindsay Smith, and it is time for a product spotlight. With me now, I've got Tyler Gullen. He's the Technical Services Manager, Western Prairies for Nufarm. Tyler, welcome here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so you can't go far without having a discussion on resistant weeds, herbicide-resistant weeds in Western Canada, specifically kochia. What's the latest? What's the background on this?
Yeah, so herbicide resistance has really been expanding in Western Canada in recent years, and kochia has really been the poster child for this, as it's really seen a dramatic jump in both, the number of herbicide groups it's developed resistance to, as well as just, how widespread geographically those resistant populations have become. So, for example, you look at the most recent Ag Canada survey in Alberta, 100% of the populations are resistant to those group 2s, have been for quite a while. Now up to 78% are resistant to glyphosate, which was a really big jump, for this year of the survey. And And the other big jump was the resistance to the group 4s, where 58% are now resistant to some, group 4, whether it's dicamba, fluroxapyr, something like that. So we're really quickly losing the herbicides that have been those workhorses for kochia control, in Western Canada, like that 2,4-D and dicamba. And that's really the case from Alberta, right across through Manitoba. And farmers really started to struggle with kochia. So, RealAg Studies did a survey this summer of over 600 farmers that showed, first, they have a really high degree of concern about the impact of weed resistance in general. And more of these 600 farmers flagged kochia as a major issue than any other weeds. And they've really said they're concerned that we're running out of solutions to manage those resistant weeds. So it's really getting to be a headache in Western Canada.
So how has Nufarm been working on solutions to help farmers navigate the kochia and greater herbicide resistance challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nufarm's been working really hard on combating herbicide resistance for a long time. And something we did recently was thought, with so few new active ingredients coming out globally, let's go back to the old catalog of herbicides, throw everything we can, everything we know about it, resistant weeds, see if there's any lost herbicides that we really weren't taking full advantage of. And in doing so, we basically rediscovered a lost herbicide in the process that we coined Duplosan. So Duplosan is a group 4 herbicide active, a systemic good group 4 herbicide active. We've known about it for literally decades, but it's only really been used in really low amounts, kind of some niche products to help synergize some other active ingredients, but was never really sprayed on its own. And what's interesting is that for whatever reason now, it is still controlling weeds that are resistant to the other group 4s. So we've done a ton of testing, and globally, I think we're up to about 8 weeds now where there's populations resistant to the other group 4s like 2,4-D and MCPA, but are still controlled by this Duplosan molecule. So, that's really exciting on its own to me, but, the most exciting part for Western Canada is kochia is one of these 8 herbicide-resistant weeds that Duplosan is still controlling. So, over the past few years, we've collected, I think we're over 450 data points now in Western Canada alone, just to figure out how we can kind of, best get this into the farmers' hands, help control the resistant weeds in their fields. And we've really seen fantastic weed control on the weed spectrum and problem weeds we have here in Western Canada, which is really exciting.
Now, what products are you bringing to market for 2024 that feature Duplosan?
Yeah, so the first product coming out powered by Duplosan is called Oxbow herbicide. And it's a cereal broadleaf herbicide from Nufarm, and it's registered and available for 2024. It's safe to use in spring wheats, durum, barley, and winter wheats. So Oxbow is a combination of that Duplosan plus bromoxynil, which was really done on purpose. Bromoxynil is one of the last actives in Western Canada that's really still working on a lot of these resistant weeds like kochia. So we really want to make sure we have multiple effective modes of action in that one jug to delay the spread of resistance. So Oxbow herbicide, it's a really nice option to control, kochia we talked about, but also a lot of other problem weeds out there, Russian thistle, chickweed, lamb's quarters, and a lot of other ones in your cereal crops. So really excited to have Oxbow available in 2024 as that first launch with Duplosan. We'll be launching a number of products in the coming years powered by that Duplosan molecule, which is available exclusively from Nufarm to help combat herbicide-resistant weeds. And if you want more information on Duplosan or Oxbow and how they can help manage resistant weeds in your field, you can always go to nufarm.ca/Duplosan, that's Duplosan, or give us a call at 1-800-868-5444.
All right, Tyler, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
It's time for the top ag news stories of the day. The Canadian Crops Convention is headed to Winnipeg this year. Yes. So if you don't take in Crop Connect this week in Winnipeg and celebrate Valentine's Day, you can definitely go there in March 5th to 7th. This year's theme is growing opportunities and includes a stellar lineup of knowledgeable speakers and great networking opportunities. Check out what the Canola Council of Canada and the Canadian Grains Council have planned and register by going to canadiancrops.ca. Okay, top ag news stories today here on this Monday. On Friday, we briefly hit on this on the Friday Issues panel. The Canadian economy started this year with a flurry of new jobs, but the underlying details were decidedly mixed, with hiring concentrated in the public sector and in part-time work. Employment in Canada rose by 37,300 in January, and the unemployment rate fell a tick to 5.7%, the first decline in just over a year, according to StatsCan in their Friday report. Financial analysts were expecting an increase of 15,000 jobs last month after a tepid gain in December. Despite the lower unemployment rate, the unemployment rate has also fallen for 4 consecutive months because job growth isn't close to offsetting a surge in population. Over the past year, employment has risen by 345,000, while the population aged 15 plus has jumped by 1 million. And again, this is not this data and this unemployment number going down is not going to really give a sign that the Bank of Canada is going to be in a real hurry here to lower rates. So we continue to see data out of the U.S. and Canada that basically this rate cut thing is pushed back. So if you were in the camp in December of saying like there could be upwards of 4 to 6 rate cuts in 2024, boy, if you took the under, you're looking like a bit of a winner right now to get back to our sports gambling at the beginning of the show. Investors face another test on Tuesday in the U.S. with the release of the Consumer Price Index, which could offer clues on the Fed's next move on interest rates. Other economic releases of note include the Retail Sales Report, the Philadelphia Fed Index Update, the Industrial Production Report, and the latest University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey. Watching that closely because we need the consumer to keep on spending when it comes to things like proteins from a beef perspective. Pork as well, like without question. So we've got expensive inventory out there on the beef side, and we need the consumer to continue to chew through it, no pun intended. The federal government in Canada will be contributing up to $11 million to Pulse Canada for a new pulse crop research cluster under the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, the 5-year framework that started in 2023. Winnipeg South Centre MP Ben Carr announced the federal commitment at the University of Manitoba on Friday afternoon. He was quoted as saying, "I'm happy to announce the significant investment our government is making to support research and development in the pulse sector. This support will help farmers improve their pulse crops, be better positioned to adapt to a changing industry, and face production challenges head on." When I hear that, I very much think of the problem of Aphanomyces, root rot, for sure. When we hear production problems in pulses, that would definitely be top of mind for me, and I'm sure it is for people that will make decisions on where those research dollars are spent. Western Canadian farmers and ranchers have endured several years of drought over the past 5 seasons. While agro-recovery and other national drought programming has been triggered in all the prairie provinces, there are other provincial insurance products available. Both Saskatchewan and Alberta have modified moisture deficiency insurance products in the last 2 years, with Alberta changing several aspects of its moisture deficiency insurance to better match actual conditions and get payouts to farmers faster. Stuart Chutter, a senior policy analyst with the Alberta Financial Services Corp, says the insurance is often called pasture insurance, and that it's not based on actual production, but instead is calculated using several factors, including precipitation and temperature. So, I know Lindsay last Tuesday had Stuart on RealAg Radio here. So if you missed that interview or want to find out more, you can find it by going back in the podcast version of this show, or, of course, go to RealAgriculture.com and read the full details of that pasture insurance. Poor weather conditions and conflict in the Red Sea continue to drive cocoa prices to all-time highs. So as we've seen canola and corn and soybeans and other ag commodities, work their way to the downside, cocoa futures have reached record highs in New York due to a market shortfall. Driven by adverse weather in West Africa, the main global cocoa producer, extreme weather conditions, including earlier rains and a subsequent dry spell, have led to crop disease and delayed harvesting, threatening production. As a result, cocoa prices have doubled over the past year, impacting chocolate makers like Hershey and increasing consumer costs for confectionery products. Yeah, like I was reading stories about this, like where I think it was like $400 a ton in one day. The price went up. I saw one trader had commented that they had never seen a week of trading like they saw last week in cocoa. Oh, to only own call options when stuff like that happens. Ukraine's 2024 spring crop seedings likely to be unchanged, according to ProFarmer. Ukraine expects its 2024 spring seedings area to be the same as last year, though it could be slightly lower in a worst-case scenario, according to Ukraine's ag minister, who said that to Reuters. Chief U.S. agricultural negotiator Doug McKellup discussed timelines for resolving the U.S.-Mexico corn dispute under the USMCA while highlighting recent advancements in U.S.-European trade relations. McKellup praised EU approvals of U.S. biotech applications and emphasized the importance of strengthening the U.S.-UK trade relationship post-Brexit. He anticipates resolution of the USMCA dispute with Mexico this year, emphasizing the need for scientific rigor in regulatory decisions. U.S. is saying the same thing. When they talk about the corn situation, talk about science, it's the same thing that Canada says when we're dealing with the UK in the EU on beef exports. Hey, science over here, everybody. You believe in science. How about you apply that scientific thinking and belief in science when it comes to trade? Oh, yeah, right. It's not convenient. Non-tariff trade barriers, right? Struggles. Chinese investors are now starting to sell off overseas assets acquired during a decade-long expansion spree. I have this story in here because I'm very curious as to how this, if this becomes a big deal, how that impacts Canadian real estate, right? In places like Vancouver, Toronto as well, but I really think about Vancouver. So what's happening here is, according to the story in the Globe, this includes distressed developers seeking cash to stabilize domestic operations and pay off debts. So this is Chinese people that own real estate abroad selling off to pay off debt back home. The recent crackdown on excessive borrowing by Beijing, has affected even major players in the industry. As a result, properties are being sold at significant discounts, contributing to a thaw in the market freeze and improving price discovery. Sales of Chinese-owned assets are not limited to Europe. They also extend to other regions like Australia. The shift from buying to selling marks a significant change in the behaviors of Chinese developers in these markets. However, the full impact of these disposals on the global commercial real estate market remains uncertain. And sorry, I said Globe Mail. I think it was from Bloomberg. So definitely something to be watching out for, because there is a lot of overseas money, especially from China, in the Vancouver real estate market. So commercial and home real estate. So we'll follow that one and see if what happens with prices in the go forward, if that really is an impact. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can definitely send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You are also very welcome or invited to find us across all the different social media platforms. Or if you don't mind, listen, if you want to really let me have it and tell me how you feel, you can always call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Tomorrow's show will be broadcasting probably from the hotel at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky. Looking forward to that. Tomorrow is Canada Ag Day, so we're going to have a bunch of interviews, hopefully, from the big event in Ottawa, hosted by Farm Credit Canada. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will, of course, chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Authority 480 Herbicide from FMC. Authority 480 herbicide delivers outstanding control of the toughest broadleaf weeds in wheat, pulse crops, flax, mustard, and more. See your local retailer today for more information.